Unaccountable. Dr. Waddell is a professor of international commerce and policy in the School of Public Policy at George Mason University. A social anthropologist by training, she writes about governance, development, foreign policy, and corruption through the lens of social anthropology. Her book, Collision and Collusion, The Strange Case of Western Aid to Eastern Europe in 2001, won the Grawemeyer Award for Ideas Improving World Order. She has been a 4-time Fulbright Fellow, has won awards from the National Science Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the German Marshall Fund, the United States Institute of Peace, and the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and has been an associate producer of 3 PBS documentaries. Perhaps closest to our heart, she has been a senior research fellow with the American Strategy Program of the New America Foundation in the past, working on the Outsourcing National Security Initiative funded in part by the Ford Foundation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Janine Waddell. Excuse me.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be back here and to also welcome all of you and see many familiar faces. Let's begin with this. What do you think of when you hear the word corruption? A bribe? Virginia Governor McDonnell and his wife convicted of bribery and fraud? A jury found that they broke the law, but did they distort public policy in any meaningful way? Will their actions compromise our health, pocketbooks, or security, or lead to deep and lasting inequalities? When compared with practitioners of what I call the new corruption, the answer, I think, is no. In the new corruption, no envelope is passed under the table. No laws are clearly broken. Yet those who practice it violate our trust, and their actions reap consequences far more damaging than, say, McDonald's accepting an engraved Rolex. More and more, the modus operandi of these practitioners seems to be just the way business is done. And more, I'm seeing the same lack of accountability in our organizations and among top players that I saw as an anthropologist in Eastern Europe, both during and after communism. Unaccountability is a necessary, though not sufficient, condition of the new corruption. And so today I'd like to address these points. 1, structured unaccountability. How is unaccountability structured into our organizations? 2, how has unaccountability become whoops, wrong slide. Okay, so 2, how has unaccountability become practically endemic among top power brokers? I guess the first slide disappeared. Sorry, that is supposed to have all 4 of them. 3, why do players not fall under the experts' definition of corruption? And 4, what can we do about it? So let's turn to 1, how is unaccountability structured into the organizations upon which we daily rely, corporate and government organizations? I began my journey to understanding structured unaccountability, not just through research and theory, but when it began to threaten my own finances. I learned that my otherwise stellar credit history, which I hoped would win me a favorable interest rate in refinancing my mortgage, had been wrecked by an overdue Bank of America credit card balance of which I was completely unaware. When I'd canceled, or I thought I canceled my credit card, my Bank of America told me that I had a 0 balance. I had a cancellation number and the name of the person and the ID number of the person to prove it. I thought straightening things out would be easy. Thus began 20-plus hours on the phone with no fewer than 20-plus different individuals in different places. I proceeded from Derek and Dina in customer service in Southern California, to John, a customer service supervisor, to Philippe in the privacy source department, and well, he wasn't authorized to say, to Carolyn in the credit department, a totally different phone number, to Adam in credit protection, Omaha, to Elsa in the credit department, or was it card services in Georgia, to Julia in external customer relations, to Delia in escalations department, the name of which alone tells you something, to Sophia also in escalations, and to Carol in credit analysis in Ohio. Back to customer services, Dan, and then Heather in card services, Kenton in credit analysis, Susan in online banking in South Carolina, and sandwiched in there somewhere, Jim, a manager in a call center. My journey transported me back to an unlikely place, communist Poland in the early 1980s under martial law. I recalled one afternoon when I spent 6 hours on the phone trying to place an international call. Was I now up against the same kind of behemoth? And did I mention that the charge that wreaked such havoc was a $13.69 bill, and that it was for a credit protection plan? That is, the package I bought to alert me to any problems had actually upended it. Exasperated, I tried to fix my problem the old-fashioned way, hoping to appeal face-to-face to a physically present person, look him in the eye, and establish a sense of trust, just as I would have in the old Poland. I walked into a local Bank of America branch. I was greeted by Charles. We were joined by Bob, who called in Ronald, the bank manager. All tried to help. But what could they do? Only get on the phone and call into that same phone tree. Through this puzzling maze, I saw firsthand how many organizations now immunize themselves from accountability, leaving anyone subject to their organization, in this case me, helpless. I couldn't help but wonder about the fates of so many other people who work 3 minimum wage jobs. Wouldn't they just have given up in my situation? In the old world, it was easier, the old world several decades ago, it was easier to identify who was in charge. In the new world, the interactions of the digital age have disconnected the bureaucrat from the client in ways never before possible. And with the bulk of technological expertise and data in the hands of big government and corporations, the system can reach out and touch you, but you can't it. Bureaucracy is organized into silos in information universes with bits and bytes separated from each other, treading in a sea of digital routines. In the Bank of America example, Carol in Ohio in credit analysis had never heard of the bank that assigned me the bank unit that assigned me cancellation numbers and station numbers. Carol and others working in such silos are incentivized to have a stake only in their own little cubicles, not in the larger outcome for the client or the public. Carol is no doubt evaluated by how well she performs on this checklist before passing me, and can I help you with anything else today? Before passing me on to the next checklist and the next silo. She's not the only siloized bureaucrat ruled by a checklist. Think banking in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis. The banker repackaging mortgages and selling them is focused on clicking off the number of deals, his eyes on a bonus, with little stake in the eventual outcome of the deal, even for his client, let alone society. Sociologists and anthropologists of finance have argued that this kind of siloization and splintering of information actually facilitated the financial meltdown. In fact, it was sociologists who coined the term structured unaccountability to describe how banks trading in exotic derivatives were organized. Exotic derivatives, by the way, signal a crisis of truth that runs deep. In the old world, banks knew much more than today about what holdings they had, and traders knew more about the value of what they were trading. Recall the expression, Let's listen to what the market says. Markets were said to function as harbingers of truth and barometers of the state of the world. But today, prices are much more disconnected from reality. The value of complex derivatives is often unclear. Madame Beauregard might be able to tell you with a crystal ball, might be able to tell you what's in your derivative. In the financial collapse, people saw their investments sink, not quite aware that bankers were slicing and dicing mortgages into financial Frankensteins. Just months after my odyssey with Bank of America, its CEO faced protests for years of shoddy lending and bad service as people struggled to refinance their mortgages. His response: "You can call us and we'll figure it out." He urged people to try the toll-free number. Accountability has been structured out of the system to such a degree that even the CEO can claim quite conveniently that he is as helpless as the rest of us. Deniability is the great new perk of power. Hear nothing, see nothing, speak nothing. Welcome to the new world of 21st century corruption, where the buck stops nowhere. This corruption centers on unaccountability, structured unaccountability, and it's pervasive, which is not at all to say that Carol in Ohio and others working in these organizations are themselves corrupt. So, how is it that today's top players have become so unaccountable? Players today have a multiplicity of affiliations and motives. Our culture has changed so fast and furiously over the past several decades that most people don't even pause to think about the affiliations they take on. In the old world, it would have been unthinkable for former leaders of the free world to use the prestige of their former office to create a highly lucrative and influential brand. Emphasis on the word brand. But in the new world, Tony Blair created what's been dubbed Blair Inc., which the Telegraph describes as a confusing mix of business, politics, and philanthropy that's administered by a complex system of companies. Blair has advised Wall Street bankers, European insurers, the government of Kazakhstan, among others, and even the late Gaddafi of Libya. While counseling Gaddafi, apparently on deals that J.P. Morgan wanted, he also served as an advisor to J.P. Morgan and additionally as an official peace envoy to the Middle East, Also in the New World, Bill Clinton, after leaving office, in addition to creating the Clinton Foundation and its global initiative, has served as a paid advisor to a global private equity and consulting firm, among many other ventures. His close aide recruited philanthropic donors to be clients, and as the New York Times put it, some Clinton aides and foundation employees began to wonder where the foundation ended and the business began. And think of the potential boundary issues represented by that band of gold. What seems to be new is that Clinton and Blair are merging business, philanthropy, and policy, and the boundaries are either not there or they shift conveniently. That's what seems to be new. One finding that emerges from my work: today's top power brokers are agile and highly flexible and operate informally. They often use think tanks, other than this one, of course, and university affiliations, other than my own, of course, not true, as vehicles of influence. They often use them as vehicles of influence. Some even set up top-down grassroots, so-called grassroots organizations or nonprofits. These organizations help them launder their images and give them the veneer of impartiality. All this signals a seismic change over the past several decades wrought by privatization, the dispersion of global authority with the end of the Cold War, and digital technology. The rise of a new type of flexible power broker and the move of power and influence underground is a signature feature of our era. Here's a power broker with multiple roles, symbolized by multiple cards: professor, think tanker, public policy maker, CEO, media pundit, member of advisory board, you name it. He casts his influence net far and wide. This aids in denying